Alhambra, Alhambra, listen. Spanish, alambrā. Arabic, romanized, al-Ahmar, pronounced, and a fortress, alamlitʻra, which is located in Granada, Andalusia, Spain. The complex was started in 1238 by Muhammad I ibn al-Ahmar, the first Nasrid emir. It was built on the hill of Sabika, an outcrop of Sierra Nevada that had been the site of the earlier fortifications and 11th-century palace of Samuel ibn Naghrillah. Later the Nasrid rulers continued to modify the site. The most significant construction campaign, which gave the Comares Palace or Myrtles Palace and Lion Palace the definitive character, occurred in the 14th century during the reigns of Joseph I and Muhammad V. After the end of the Christian Reconquista in 1492, the site became the royal palace of Ferdinand and Isabella, where Christopher Columbus received royal support for his expeditions, and part of the palace was converted in the Renaissance style. In 1526, Charles I of Spain commissioned a new Renaissance palace more fitting for the Holy Roman Emperor in a revolutionary Mannerist style influenced by humanist philosophy that was directly juxtaposed with Andalusian Nasrid architecture, but was never completed due to the Morisco rebellion in Granada. The last Alhambra of the Islamic palace was built for the last Muslim emir in Spain during the decline of the Nasrid dynasty, which was increasingly subject to the Christian kings of Castile. After being left in disrepair for centuries, the building occupied by squatters, the Alhambra was rediscovered after the defeat of Napoleon I, who had retaliated for the destruction of the site. The first rediscoverers were British intellectuals and then other Northern European Romantic travelers. It is now one of Spain's main tourist attractions, exhibiting the country's most significant and well-known Islamic architecture, along with intervening 16th century and later Christian buildings and gardens. The Alhambra is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. 1. Origin and early history. Evidence of Roman presence is unclear, but archaeologists have found remains of ancient foundations on the Sabika hill. A fort or fortification, possibly dating to the Visigothic period, is on the hill in the 9th century. The first reference to Qalat al-Ahmar is during a battle between the Arabs and Maladi during the reign of Abdullah ibn Muhammad r. 888–912. According to surviving documents from that era, the Red Castle was quite small, and its walls were unable to deter the army's intent to conquer. The first reference to al-Ahmar comes in a line of poetry attached to an arrow fired over the fort, recorded by Ibn Hayyan. Relaxed and roofless is our enemy's house, overrun by autumn rains, traversed by strong winds. Let them in the Red Castle, Qalat al-Ahmar, hold their naughty counsel. Destruction and woe surround them on every side. In the early 11th century, Granada was dominated by the Zirids, the Sanhaja Berber group and the Zirid branch that controlled parts of North Africa. When the Caliphate of Córdoba collapsed after 1009 and the Fitna civil war began, the Zirid leader Zawi ben Ziri established an independent kingdom for himself, Taifa Granada. The Zirids built their fort and palace, known as al-Kasaba al-Qadima, Old Fort, or Old Palace, on the hill now occupied by the neighborhood of Albayqin. It is connected with two other forts on the hills of Sabika and Moror in the south. The fort on Sabika Hill, also known as al-Kasaba al-Jadida, New Fort, was later used for the foundation of the present-day al-Kasaba Alhambra. Under Zirid kings Habis ibn Maksan and Badis, the most powerful figure was the Jewish administrator known as Samuel ha-Najid in Hebrew, or Ismail ibn Naghrillah in Arabic. Samuel built his own palace on the hill of Sabika, presumably on the site of the current palace, although none remains. Reportedly includes gardens and water features. 2. Nasrid period. After 1228 Almohad's rule collapsed and local rulers and factions emerged throughout the Al-Andalus region. With the Reconquista in full swing, the Christian kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, under Kings Ferdinand III and James I, respectively, made major conquests in Al-Andalus. Castile captured Córdoba in 1236 and Sevilla in 1248. Meanwhile, Ibn al-Ahmar, Muhammad I, established what was to become the last and longest-serving Muslim dynasty on the Iberian Peninsula, the Nasrid, which ruled the Emirate of Granada. The background was modest, but he was able to win the support and approval of several Muslim settlements under threat from Castilian advances. After settling in Granada in 1238, Ibn al-Ahmar initially lived in the old fortress of Zirides on the Albaycin hill, but in the same year he began construction of the Alhambra as a residence and a new fort. According to an Arabic manuscript since published as Anónimo de Madrid y Copenhague, during the reign of the Nasrid dynasty, the Alhambra was converted into a Palatine city, complete with an irrigation system consisting of acequias for the Generalife garden located outside the fort. Previously, the structure of the old Alhambra depended on rainwater collected from water tanks and from what could be brought from the Albaycin. The creation of the Sultan's Canal strengthened the Alhambra's identity as a palace city rather than a defensive and hermitage structure. The hydraulic system includes 2 long aqueducts and several advanced elevation devices to bring water to the highlands. The Comares baths are the best preserved element of this early construction, as the rest of the palace was further modified by his successors. Near the main mosque Ismail I also built Rawda, the tomb of the Nasrid dynasty, of which only a few have been preserved. Yusuf I.R. 1333–1354 undertook further work at the Comares Palace, including the construction of the Ambassador's Hall and other work around present-day Mekshua. He also built the main gate of the Alhambra, the Puerta de la Justicia, and the Torre de la Córdoba, one of several small towers with lavishly decorated rooms along the north wall. Muhammad V R. 1354–1391, with interruption built the Lion Palace to the east of the Comares Palace in an area formerly occupied by the garden. He also remodeled most of the Mekshua wings in the Comares Palace. Elsewhere in the Comares Palace, the ornately decorated facade of the Patio del Cuarto Dorado, as well as some of the decorations at the court of Myrtles, also date from its era. After Muhammad V, relatively little major construction work took place on the Alhambra. One exception is the Torre de las Infantas, which dates from the time of Muhammad VII, 1392–1408. In the 15th century, the Nasrid dynasty was in decline and chaos, with few significant construction projects. 3. Spanish period. The last Sultan of Nasrid, Muhammad XII of Granada, ceded the Emirate of Granada in 1492 without the Alhambra itself being attacked when the forces of Reyes Católicos, King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella I of Castile, took the surrounding area in overwhelming force. Muhammad XII removed the remains of his ancestors from the complex, as verified by Leopoldo Torres Balbas in 1925, when he found 70 empty tombs. Its remains are now most likely in Montdoujar in the Kingdom of Leckrine. After the Christian conquest of the city in 1492, the conquerors began to transform the Alhambra. Openworks are filled with chalk, painting and gilding are removed, and furniture is soiled, torn, or removed. Charles V (1516–1556) rebuilt sections in the Renaissance style of the period and demolished most of the Winter Palace to make room for the Renaissance-style structure which was never completed. Philip V (1700–1746) Italianized several rooms and completed his palace amidst the Moorish buildings. He has a partition built that blocks the whole apartment. The governorship of the Tendilla Mondejar family ended in 1717–1718, when Philip V confiscated the family property in the Alhambra and removed the Marquess of Mondejar, José de Mendoza Ibornez de Segovia (1657–1734), from his position as mayor alcalde of the Alhambra, in retaliation for taking the position against him in the War of the Spanish Succession. The departure of the Tendilla-Mondejar family marked the beginning of a period of the Alhambra's most severe decline. During this period, the Spanish state dedicated few resources to it, and its management was taken over by self-serving local governors who lived with their families in abandoned palaces. 4. Main structure. Access from the city to the Alhambra Gardens is provided by the Puerta de las Granadas Pomegranate Gate, a triumphal arch that dates back to the 15th century. A steep ascent leads past Charles V Pillar, a fountain erected in 1554, to the main entrance of the Alhambra. This is the Puerta de la Justicia, Gate of Justice, a large horseshoe archway flanked by square towers and used by the Moors as an informal court. The Hand of Fatima, with outstretched fingers as a talisman against the evil eye, is carved over this gate on the outside. Locks, symbols of authority, occupy a suitable place in the interior. A narrow passage leads into the Plaza de los Aljibes, place of the cisterns, the wide open space that separates Alcazaba from the Moorish palace. To the left of the passage rises the Torre del Vino wine tower, built in 1345 and used in the 16th century as a cellar. To the right is Charles V's palace, a smaller Renaissance building, to which parts of the Alhambra, including the original main entrance, were torn down. Modern history. Over the following years, the Alhambra grew more and more damaged. Between 1810 and 1812, Granada was occupied by the troops of Napoleon during the Peninsular War. French troops, under the command of Prince Sebastiani, occupied the Alhambra as a fortified position and caused significant damage to the monument. After evacuating the city, they attempted to blow up the entire compound to prevent it from being reused as a fortress position. They managed to blow up 8 towers before the remaining fuses were deactivated by the Spanish soldier José Garcia, thus saving what was left today. In 1821, an earthquake caused further damage. Restoration work was carried out in 1828 by the architect José Contreras, endowed in 1830 by Ferdinand VII. After Contreras' death in 1847, he was succeeded by his son Raphael, died 1890, and his grandson. In 1830, Washington Irving lived in Granada and wrote Tales of the Alhambra, which stimulated international interest in southern Spain and in Islamic-era monuments such as the Alhambra. Some of the most important historical restoration work was the intervention of Leopoldo Torres Balbás in the 1930s. The young architect opened a walled-off arcade, excavated a filled pool, replaced missing tiles, completed inscriptions that had no part of their stucco writing, and installed a ceiling in the still unfinished palace of Charles V. 6. Building complex. According to the site's current architect, Pedro Salmerón Escobar, the Alhambra evolved organically over several centuries from an ancient hilltop fort defined by a narrow headland carved by the river Darro and overlooking the Vega or Granada plain as it descends from Sierra Nevada. The red soil from which the fort is built is granular aggregate held together by a medium of red clay, which gives the brick and stone reinforced construction its characteristic hue and is the root of the name, Bukit Merah. This rugged down-to-earth nature is balanced by the subtle alabaster white that surprises famous interior stucco work. The Alhambra is about 740 meters (2,430 feet) long by 205 meters (670 feet) at its greatest width. It stretches from west-northwest to east-southeast and covers an area of approximately 142,000 square meters (1,530,000 square feet) or 35 hectares. The westernmost features of the Alhambra are the Alcazaba fort, a fortified position built to protect the original post-Roman district of Illiberry, now Centro, and Gornata al-Yard, Jewish Granada, now Rialejo, and the Moorish suburb of El Albayzin.